What up YouTube, Bonza here, back with another video, and this is going to be my review of Secret Level Episode 5, They Shall Know No Fear. And yes, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I am a huge fan of Warhammer 40k, so this was definitely the episode of Secret Level that I was looking forward to the most. I knew I was always going to like this show because it's, based on gaming culture, but as a fan of Warhammer 40k, it was just like, yep. In fact, I actually ended up watching everything out of order. I watched the Dungeons and Dragons ones first, and then I watched Warhammer. And then, yeah, because, I couldn't wait. Anyway, let's get right into the review now. But before that, let me just briefly mention that whilst I am aware of the Space Marine games, I've never actually played them, right? So I don't have any background knowledge on Titus, right? I know he's the main character of the games, and I know he was featured in this, but I don't really know what his story is. Although I am vaguely aware of some aspects of it because, I'm someone who consumes a lot of Warhammer content. Anyway, to start off, I'd like to just mention that the visuals, right, the animation of this episode were just amazing, right? Like, blew it right off the park. I think the Dungeons and Dragons one was the most realistic looking out of the Secret Level episodes, and the Pac-Man is another one that I felt stood out to me. But yeah, this one was also just amazing, and I think, especially when they went onto the fight scenes and stuff, which I'll talk about later on, the Zinch powers, those were amazing to look at. Yeah, the visuals, fantastic, love them a lot. And I think the sound design and the music, nothing really stood out to me, but decent enough job. So I think overall, as far as the visuals and the sound was done, I think they did an amazing job making this show look as good and sound as good as it did. So going on to a bit about the plot now. So overall, the plot was pretty simple, right? You have the Space Marines, they have their mission to go in and destroy the Apostle Relic, or apostate relic, right? Yeah, or whatever the heck that temple thing was, right? So simple to follow along, and I think people who aren't aware of the Warhammer 40k universe will be able to vaguely follow along with that storyline. And for me personally, the highlights I think would be the same highlights as everyone, right? I think the first highlight would be when the cultists showed up, right, and they just got one-shotted on their bikes by the Space Marines, and then obviously the guys that come after with their, what were those guys even thinking, right? What did they expect to happen? But either way, that was, it's always fun to watch the Space Marines go to work, right? The way they just smash those guys' heads, and just easily one of the best fight scenes. Just love it. Like I was shouting, excited all over the place when that was happening. That was easily the part that I think had the highest, got the most shouts out of me when I was watching, because yeah, that was pretty, really freaking cool to see all that happen. And I guess the second scene that followed soon after, with Titus rushing through and destroying that vehicle and then destroying the tank. I've actually always imagined a scene like that before, because knowing how heavy the Space Marines are with their armor and everything, it stands to reason, given how strong their armor is, how heavy it is, that they would have the weight necessary, provided they could run at speeds that we know they can run at, to just smash through a car. So I've actually always, in my mind, knew that was possible, right? And I've never read a book about it or anything like that, so I wasn't aware of it happening in the lore, although I'm sure it has. But this was the first time for me, as someone who's only ever consumed Warhammer, watching lore videos and stuff, to see something that I imagined, knowing that it's possible that it could happen, and then to see it happen. And I think either way, even if you're someone who's only ever read it in the books, this would probably be your first time seeing it happen too. So either way, I think all of us are very happy by that scene. That was awesome to see. And then the icing on the cake, him killing that guy, dropping in the grenade and destroying that tank. That was awesome. All right, so and then I think lastly, the other very impressive feature for me was obviously that fight sequence with the Zinch sorcerer at the end, right? He was pretty freaking cool, right? And all of his powers were just amazing. In fact, that was my favorite visual sequence altogether, right? Just watching him freeze time, go through one Space Marine to another, and then seeing him actually use his abilities to draw out their fear and turn it against them. Amazing. Easily my favorite sequence was that. And by the way, that Zinch sorcerer, I knew he was gonna look scary, but when I actually got to see his face for myself and realize how scary he looked, damn, that was visually frightening. It was a lot more scary than I thought it would be. And I'm also looking forward to seeing how other people react to his face when they see that. That was definitely a highlight. So yeah, all in all, action-packed story, very easy to follow along, looked visually impressive. I'd say the only lacking department of it would be they tried to build on an emotional core there between the Titus and the Sergeant, right? But I think due to time constraints, and obviously they have to focus on what they knew was going to be more impressive for the fans and I think the public in general. And so it didn't hit as much the scenes between the Sergeant and Titus for me as an emotional core. But either way, I think it was nice that they added it there, and yeah, it was fine. It was there. It did its job. Not the best, but it was okay. And yeah, I think next I'd like to go deeper into like the characters now, right? So Titus for me, actually, I wound up thinking a lot about him and going through like a whole process of like feeling one way about him and then going into another. But there's something that they touched on throughout this episode that the more I thought about it, it sort of threw me into this whole loophole. So let's just like think about carefully the part where it's mentioned that Titus is not someone who experiences fear, right, the way other people do. And then right from that first sequence, right, when he charges that tank, you saw the other Space Marines were trying to take it cautiously, right? But Titus just ran right to it and smashed it, right? And then later on, when the sorcerer tried to mess with his head, it was more directly obvious now that this guy had no fear, right? And that's like an impressive thing to think about, and you think that it's cool and all that. But you know, the more I've thought about it, when you really think about characters who have no fear, you know, often it's difficult to relate to these kind of characters, and so often they don't tend to be the characters that I guess maybe the normie audience, and me too sometimes, that I tend to like the most, right? I end up not liking them as much as I would other characters who are more relatable. But then I thought of another character who is also like that, who I've been enjoying a lot recently, right? I'm a One Piece fan as well, and I've already up to date and everything, but I've been rewatching it now. And you know, if you think about Luffy, his character, he's very different from Titus, yes. Personality-wise, they're so different. But there is one thing they share: fearless, right? These guys have no fear, and they will charge straight ahead into trouble. And yeah, often it gets them into trouble, or Luffy at least, right? But it's that fearlessness that winds up inspiring people and getting people to sort of like feel like they want to push themselves beyond and accomplish things, right? And so as I was thinking about Titus, originally he sort of dropped, right? Like I didn't know what to think of him at first, but my impression of him was decent character, but not very interesting. But then I started to, I guess, to be honest, project Luffy onto him and think more about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I can see how they might still be able to make this character more interesting to follow along. And so I don't know how his character and his story plays out in the games, but I'm very interested now. And you know, eventually when I do wind up playing it, I'm gonna see if I can find parallels between him and Luffy, because you know, that's just a weird thing that I thought of just now, and I'm wondering if there's any truth to that. But obviously, without playing the games, it remains to be seen as far as I'm concerned. So I don't want spoilers in the comments down below. Don't mention that if you're going to comment down below about his true character and his storyline and everything. I'm interested in finding that out for myself eventually when I get to play these games. But yeah, Titus ended up being an interesting character for me to think about. Even though not much was talked about it and it's more my own projection, yeah, I still had some fun thinking about that. But to be honestly true, and I'll get into it now into my rating, which I'm going to do next, it is unfortunate that not much character development could be done within this short time. And I think if there was done some aspect of that, it would elevate it more. But that said, you know, the action sequence and everything that I've mentioned before was still pretty good, so yeah, it rates pretty high. So anyway, getting into the actual rating now, I'm going to do this by splitting off my subjective rating from my objective rating, because I want to actually tell you guys how much I like this show, but then also try to be objective about it. So subjectively speaking, I give this an 8.5 out of 10. Right? It's not a 9 to me. I didn't enjoy it amazingly right throughout, right? So I can't give it like a 9 or anything higher than that. But definitely it was one of the most exciting things that I've watched, you know, featuring Warhammer. And honestly, in recent times I haven't seen that much really exciting shit. So this definitely is up there for me personally. So that's why I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. Anyway, so going on to my objective score now, I think I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10. And that's because whilst I did enjoy it a lot personally, I would say that, you know, it has a simple storyline, very action-packed, very visually stunning. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe a 7.5. I think it's a 7, but then I think because of how amazing the action sequences is and stuff like that, I bump it up to a 7.5, because I do think that it's definitely going to be enjoyable to watch, even if it's not a series that you know of well, right? It's one of those kind of videos where the visual storytelling will captivate you and intrigue you more, and sort of cover a bit for the lack of like a story depth or a character depth or anything like that. So that's why I bump it up to a 7.5. Yeah, that's me bumping it up. But yeah, it's around a 7.5 to me as far as like me trying to be objective. But personally, as far as my personal enjoyment, it was easily an 8.5. So yeah, that's my my rating of the episode as a whole. I think as a Warhammer fan, these are some good times right now. You know, there's also the news that Henry Cavill recently confirmed everything with Amazon, and they've already confirmed like a starting point for the universe, and they're going to start writing out the script and everything. So yeah, as a Warhammer fan, these are good days, and I'm sure if you're a fellow Warhammer fan out there, it feels like we're living in the golden days, or the beginning of the golden days. So let's hope Henry can keep them to account, and us too, we can complain about it and make sure that they don't mess up the lore, because we don't want a Witcher or anything like that on our hands too. So yeah, with that, I think I'm going to end off this review. Thank you very much for watching the video. Don't forget to like the video if you like the video, and subscribe to my channel if you're interested in any more reviews from me. And yeah, with that, I'm going to sign out. This is Bonsai, signing out. Catch you all later.